Welcome to FinOps in Action. I'm your host, Alon Arvat. Each week, I'll sit down with FinOps experts to explore the toughest challenges between FinOps and engineering. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of FinOps in Action. Today, I'm really pleased to have a special guest that did some phenomenal work in the FinOps space. He's always been big on volunteering and community work, did a lot in his son's baseball team, but most of his time in the last 33 years was focused on leading digital transformation across various companies. I'm happy to welcome Senior Product Owner of FinOps at AvidXchange, Preston Tauscher. Preston, how are you today?
Great. Hey, Alon. Great to be here with you.
Great, and let's get straight to business, Preston. What do you think should be the FinOps practitioner top priority?
So there's actually a great question. So from a practitioner's top priority, it really depends upon what are the organizational goals and gaps. The great thing that FinOps.org has is a methodology with all of the FinOps capabilities, and it's really tailoring the methodology to what is the need that is greatest at the organization. And we've really leveraged the crawl, walk, run approach to drive adoption across the organization and visibility and value. So it's been a fun ride over the last 2 years at AvidXchange.
And Preston, on our previous conversations, you mentioned a lot leadership and working with leadership. And I'm actually curious if there were any leaders in your career that coached you, they guided you into the successful place you are in today.
Thanks. Yeah, actually, so interestingly, when I was young and much more exciting in my career, the senior VP at IBM who took a liking to me gave me some sage advice, which was when you find a good one, hitch your wagon and ride as long as you can. And I was fortunate to work with and for a guy named Rich Gilbert, who was the youngest exec on the fast track at IBM. He wound up being CTO at 2 companies, the CIO at 3, and then also owning the business as well. And I partnered with Rich over the last 23 years prior to joining Avid in really trying to pull organizations forward and drive transformation. Been a great ride, and I've learned amazing things. Rich is very much a visionary to strategic leader, and I've always been more so tactical to strategic. So the two of us balanced each other real well in driving positive change. So I'm sure I'll wind up having a bit of what I call Richisms, things that I've learned over the last 25 years and applied to my career, and then hoping to help others with some of the things that I've learned.
And is there anything you learned from him that helped you become a better FinOps leader?
Yeah. So Rich has always driven metrics-based organizations and focused on value. I've been afforded the opportunity every couple of years to perform a different role for Rich. And I really think, when we look at the FinOps personas, having walked in those folks' shoes, it really helps to sell the vision and the value that's associated with it, because FinOps is about driving change, change in actions that either result in cost savings or moving our strategies forward. So to be able to communicate with folks and sell the vision and get them to embrace the change and why they need to change the way that they've always approached things, it definitely helps across all the personas, from leadership to finance, to our engineering teams and leaders. So it's been a great ride, and I really think my background has kind of positioned me to help pull the organization forward with our FinOps program here at AvidXchange.
Yes. And you mentioned that Richard always wanted to see data and facts. what are the types of data today you provide leadership when it comes to FinOps?
Yeah, that's a great question. So metrics is interesting because you could have way too many or the right ones. So the focus really is on metrics that matter. So one of the things that we'll talk about is unit cost. So through our journey with FinOps here, in our second year in the program, we implemented cloud unit costs where we partnered with finance. AvidXchange is fintech, so we look at our cost per transaction, and we look at our prod unit cost spend and our non-prod. And there is a unit cost operating review that the president of Avid attends, where the trending is showed every month. So when costs tend to go up, the president sees the trending and asks some questions. And the goodness is, in partnering across the organization, the whole key, you want to understand what are the cost drivers and then what's the value. Because a challenge that every organization has is spend versus value. So where we're pivoting the organization now is, from a reactive state where, hey, we know what the spend is, but in use of unit costs, we want to translate it back to value. So like, for example, one of our product organizations is onboarding or has a plan to onboard like 93,000 enrollments this year. That's going to drive increased costs. But instead of the organization viewing it as, hey, you missed your cloud budget, we're kind of changing the direction of the cruise liner in a small port to say, hey, here's the cost per enrollment. So it's tied to value, and the organization can understand that, well, the spend is increasing, the value and the revenue that we get out of it's a much better message.
Great. And I would love actually to double down on a unit cost. And first of all, we all know that good unit cost relies on good tagging.
Yeah.
How did you handle this challenge?
So that's interesting that you brought that up. So last year, our CIO, Angelique Gibson, in her leadership offsite meeting, she had threw out a challenge. We have 35 to 40,000 Azure resources. And we also have a couple other providers, but she kept hearing about the challenges after Avid moved to the cloud about how we didn't really know who the owners were. So challenge was accepted. And we did a year ago what was tagged Tag-a-thon. Um, so it was one day, and Angelique Gibson was like, let's just kill the problem and put it behind us. So it was a lot of work. But one of the things that I've always believed is you manufacture your own luck with preparation. So we had a series of office hour sessions. So what we've also done is, we have structured our cloud spend into value streams. So we had office hour sessions for each value stream, and we had 107 participants, but we helped them to understand the why behind it, and it really was an all hands on deck series of events to drive greater data consistency and to put the focus on operational excellence. And the value that the organization got with the data consistency is across finance, security, service management, FinOps, of course, operations, and then on product too. And
Great, person. Actually, you opened here so many fascinating topics that I would like to talk all of them, but let's tackle one by one. So first of all, you mentioned the Tag-a-thon, which is very interesting because when we were at Rapid7, we had the cost-a-thon for cost optimization. And actually, that's what drove us to start point five because we said cost-a-thon is great, but you need to create continuous efficiency. And I would guess that tagging in many ways is the same. So Tag-a-thon as a one-time effort to get to whatever 90% tagging is amazing, but you need to find a way to ensure tagging moving forward. So how did you go about that?
So yeah, so interesting that you bring up Costathon, because after we did Tag-a-thon, we had a similar effort where, leadership came back with, a number to reduce our R&D spend. So that was our focus in Q3 and Q4 last year, to try and drive cost savings across the organization. And again, I realize that's a part of FinOps. Everybody's always interested in the dollars. And, we talked about metrics earlier. There's lots of different metrics in IT, but the one common metric that everybody gets is dollars. That works, when you're selling the message, and the way that I've been driving the team here is, we're big on enabling content. So as we are trying to, you know, build a self-serve model, we've got lots of wiki pages, 3 to 5 minute videos that helps folks to kind of fish for themselves. So this way they're not just waiting on a team to tell them what their optimization opportunities are. And, you're always going to have leaders in that area. We've been fortunate that 3 of our larger value streams really have been great partners to work with. And they really have just embraced optimization and cost savings and, visibility into costs from a showback perspective. So they've been great partners, and, we've definitely hit our successes. And so as we have grown, what we're also doing is, I would call our value streams verticals. So now for 2025, one of the things that we're focused on, the term that we've coined it is interactive governance. So while we have our monthly governance meetings reviewing cloud spend and and optimization opportunities, we're also focusing on our horizontals with the CTO and his engineering leaders. So this way, as a value stream runs into some budget challenges, we can leverage the expertise across the organization of folks that have implemented and drove savings. And, if there's favorable, budget, we could take some of the savings in one area and potentially move it to other areas of the org that are running into challenges, either due to unexpected costs or unexpected but anticipated increases as product wants to onboard or ramp additional buyers or suppliers or enrollments. So it's definitely evolving, but it's a good opportunity to leverage the success of our verticals in a horizontal way across the organization.
That's great. And I'm actually fascinated about the concept of like taking savings from one side and make sure you apply it to different sides of the business. I could argue that create a negative incentive to become efficient, because if someone else is doing the work and now I'm benefiting for it, then it maybe create a negative incentive. So I wonder if that is an issue you actually encountered and how you dealt with it.
So what's interesting is I joined the organization in 2023. As we went into 2024, I've mentioned value streams. We implemented a value stream structure because in essence, we had a cloud cost center. So the running joke at, the company meetings was, my second line is a great guy named DJ Never. Cloud budget isn't just DJ's problem, and that's what everybody would say. But now it's kind of moved down to cloud budget is not just Preston's problem, but by implementing value streams, one of the things I like to call it a 2-in-a-box ownership model. So we have both a product leader and an engineering leader that own the cloud budget for their value stream. So we're measuring all of them. And, there's a little bit of gamification in there as well, with competitions between, the different value streams and leaders and teams. And one of the things that, our leader offered up was, hey, whoever is the greatest percentage under, FinOps will buy you lunch that quarter. so, uh, but also to directly answer your question, one of the things what we're trying to do and move towards is, you know, total cost of ownership and move towards lean budgeting. Because the reality is, one of the things I've always believed is we win as a team. So while we parsed out the budget to our different value streams, we win as a team because overall it's a top level budget that's divvied up to all the value stream leaders.
That's great. And I wonder, in your gamification process, what type of metrics do you measure? Is it only savings, or do you measure anything else?
So one of our top level organization goals is beat the budget. So we always measure, budget performance, and, the terminology I'm trying to use across both product and IT, or engineering, as we call it here, is, hey, when we're favorable to budget, that's value to the organization. When folks are over budget, that's risk to the organization. And the amount that they're over budget, we've implemented processes this year to leverage our service management or ITSM processes and create cloud budget incidents to try and drive greater accountability. So we could see what the difference is between somebody's budget and what their actuals are. And we annualize it to help quantify the risk to the business, to help try and drive positive actions to either fix the risk or try and drive discussions towards, hey, you know what, we may be getting quite a bit of value / revenue out of where we're at. So let's continue to focus on driving revenue versus refactoring, for example. So like everybody, you want to use data to drive discussions and decisions. And that's really been our approach here.
That's great. And I now have a scenario for you, Preston. I'm a leader of one of the value streams at the AvidXchange, and you find out that I have a lot of waste, for example, but I'm on budget. Would you expect me now to do something about the waste, or as long as I'm on budget, do whatever you want?
Nah, so it is a two-sided coin. So everybody's measured on their budget performance, but the value in moving to cloud is optimization. And the first year that it was here, it took me a while to get leadership around this. But like, for example, you know, everybody knows the value of cloud. You could spin it up when you need it and spin it down when you don't. Avid is very much a can-do company. So I've honestly been amazed. So Avid had to move to the cloud within 6 months, and they got it done, which really is just an amazing accomplishment. But we some data that I've been providing to senior leadership, like for example, we have one of the things that we look at is elasticity. What's our non-production weekend spend? And I'm like, folks, if we can take 50 to 60% of that and reinvest it, think about how much capability that we can drive to provide value to our customers. So we lean into the data and the metrics here and use that to drive discussions to lead to decisions.
I really liked how you position it as reinvesting, because very often I feel that when you talk to engineers, if you just want to cut on costs, you're basically taking away from them something. If you position it as reinvesting, you position it as something that will support their value stream or their product growth.
Or innovation.
Yes, absolutely. Innovation,
That's a
absolutely.
term that they gravitate towards. Everybody likes to innovate. So the more that we could save, the more that we can innovate, whether that's on product capabilities or internal capabilities. Like one of the focus items for last year and this year is leaning into AI. So in order to try and drive either process change, savings, et cetera, and, the more that we can optimize, the more that we can spend.
And let's spark the AI discussion for a few minutes from now, which is something that would definitely love to double down with you. But I just want to make sure we cover the part of how you talk to engineers. You talk about reinvestment. Also, in the beginning of the conversation, you talked about talking with them about the why behind. I wonder what are your tips to engagement with engineers?
Yeah. And it's really be data centric and talk to them, meet them where they're at. So goodness is we do our monthly value stream FinOps governance meetings. You know, we got a small team, but we look at what are the optimization opportunities with orphaned resources, with right sizing, with reserved instances, and really meet them where they're at, and push to try and prioritize into their roadmaps stories so that they can deliver optimization. They're under budget. Part of the carrot and the stick is, hey, you may get a free lunch at the end of the quarter, you know, based upon your cloud budget performance. But yeah, you want to meet them where they're at and help them to understand based upon the data. Hey, you can get the same resource, but at a lower price point, and not affect anything that you're doing. So it's helping them to understand and helping them to learn. Another focus item for us is, we look at things more strategically and try and look at our top cloud costs. Like another avenue that we're pushing down is premium disk or storage in our lower environment. And it's like, because, we're paying, how many times more in a lower environment. Totally get it in your DR, your staging and production environments, but we have an opportunity to save costs. And then here's the data on our current spend. Here's what we could save that we can reinvest into innovation and delivering capabilities. So, the way that I've tried to approach it is think about things as like mini lean business cases to present and sell to leadership. Here's the reason why we need to go down this path and get their support in order to drive take up and proliferation through the organization.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And if I'm looking now at the engineer organization, from leadership to group leaders, team leaders, and up to the engineer that needs to develop the application, if I look horizontally at product management, for example, out of this group, who do you expect to be on top of budget and on top of cost optimization?
So great question. But to be honest, here at AvidXchange, I'm partnering with our product and or engineering leadership as well as the engineers themselves. So one of it's funny, but I've been associated with a number of four-letter words through my career: test, data. Here at AvidXchange, the one four-letter word that everybody associates with me is cost. So, I'm at our architectural review board, and goodness is, we partnered with architecture, and FinOps is a voting member of the architectural review board. And, one of the mantras that we did is if there isn't cost associated with the solution that architecture is bringing forward, can't bring it forward for a vote. So we want folks focused on cost, and being efficient in the way that we're spending Avid's money. And the goodness, we've talked about data, another four-letter word, you know, as we capture the costs or the estimates that are associated with it, it's only going to help us to improve going forward. And I know you from an architect perspective and me from my background, you know, you're going to learn as you go full life cycle through deploy and rolling out capabilities. So as we start to capture data with regards to our costs and our estimates, it's going to help us to better estimate going forward.
And let's talk about estimating. And I believe in the beginning, you also mentioned the fact that you want to move from a reactive to a proactive approach, where you actually not only measure the spend per transaction, but also try to predict what will be the revenue of a transaction.
Yeah, and actually that is an effort that we're partnering with our finance organization towards total cost of ownership, which is awesome. There's some concepts that I'm trying to pull the org forward to lean into, like lean budgeting, but TCO is definitely a factor. Because the reality is every organization has product suites. Some are going to be much more profitable than others, but to be able to marry revenue and cost is going to help us to understand what's our more profitable capabilities. And then what every organization has a challenge with is retiring the old ones because everybody's so used to developing the new, but lag at retiring the old. So that's another component of lean budgeting where you want to make sure you have a balanced mix, and retiring is part of that, retiring tech debt. So it helps to focus on which are the better candidates to potentially retire and then take the more profitable parts of those and then incorporate them into a smaller product stack of more profitable items.
Cool. And I'm also curious is if you feel comfortable or do you find it easy to predict the spend of a new product or a new functionality? It's always a challenge to predict, I think, for every engineer and for every FinOps leader. I wonder how you handle it and how you make it more accurate, or how do you deal with the potential inaccuracy of it?
So actually, great question. That's something that I had to implement at my last company, getting involved in FinOps. But the approach I'm trying to create here is along our product delivery lifecycle, you add formalize estimating and forecasting of both the cost and the value side of the equation along our PDLC or product delivery lifecycle milestones to increasing levels of accuracy. So like at ideation, it may be plus or minus 100%. At design, maybe it's plus or minus 70%. At build, maybe it's plus or minus 30 to 50%. But the key thing is you measure along the way, you're going to get smarter. But the focus is really, you got to keep it lightweight. Because if it's heavy and burdensome, folks aren't going to do it, which is what too. But one of the areas and items that we are targeting this year, we got 2 years worth of spend data. So we're leveraging the data to try and create the easy button for our architects, the folks on the product side, and our engineers. So this way we could look at the historical spend of our product capabilities, create t-shirt sizings that'll help with some of the early estimates until we get to a design state where we could start to use the pricing calculators to get to a more refined estimate and then track those actuals as we go through delivery. So use the data, use the data, use the data to help try and drive improvement.
Absolutely. And this is a really cool methodology. I think it's the first time someone shares something like that on the podcast. That's great. And I want to take back the AI discussion from the parking lot. So you mentioned that you encourage your team to save on costs and invest more innovation. Obviously, a lot of that today is AI. I wonder if the usage of AI also create challenges for you as a FinOps leader.
Yeah. So yes, the short answer is yes. So we built dashboards that are tracking the costs of AI. So while there's definitely organizational focus on it, we just want folks to think about cost and value. So value is the new term I'm trying to get myself associated with. It's a 5-letter word versus a 4-letter word. But reality is, you know, value is what it's about. And it's, we have a really inspirational product leader, Doug Anderson. You know, he is consistently utilizing the term value. And cool, at the last big company planning meeting, I grabbed time with Doug afterwards and said, hey, you're the only one of all the leaders that talked about value. I was like, we also got to talk about cost. Because the reality is when you can estimate to greater levels of accuracy, value versus cost, that's going to help you prioritize the most important things to work on.
Right. Two aspects that are definitely hard to detach.
Yeah. So one on a good point. So AvidXchange is the first company I've been at in a long, long time that has a stack-like list of priorities.
Wow.
I can't tell you the last company I was at that had a list of priorities. So, Doug and the product team, they have their priorities. Now I'm trying to influence things with data so that we know what are the most profitable things to work on.
That's great. Cool. Preston, I think we've already learned a lot from you. It's probably time to learn more about you. So today you live in Atlanta, Georgia. You're actually our second guest from Atlanta. So obviously there is a pretty decent community there. And you just finished building your home, right?
Yeah, that is building a home is a journey unto itself. So when we became empty nesters, we moved in town to Atlanta from Alpharetta, which is one of the northern suburbs. And yeah, it's been great for us. I mean, it's so walkable. There's great restaurants. There's always something to do in Atlanta, which is awesome. Like this past weekend, my neighborhood hosted Porch Fest, where there was 85 bands that set up on 60 people's front porches. And you just walk around through the neighborhood, listen to some awesome bands, and they got food trucks and beer trucks and an Orders Market. There was like 40,000 people that were there, and there's no cost to it too. So there's always something to do. You've got all of your sports teams with the Braves who've been playing well for a while and doing a little bit better now. Atlanta United, the Falcons, the Hawks and the Atlanta Dream. So there's always something to do, and it's awesome. And it's so walkable, and it's you get 4 seasons here. Don't have to deal with the winters like you guys do up north.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're already an empty nester, right? How do you like it?
So we love being an empty nester. When we moved downtown, my wife and I would walk to dinner 3-4 nights a week. So we have one that flew back to the nest, which is totally cool. We're proud of both of our sons. My wife is one of the female leaders in IT at a large retailer here in Atlanta. So our family bleeds orange, if that gives you a little clue. And our son is there as a software engineer as well. So we're real proud of him. And then my older son, we're very fortunate. He was 4 months early and weighed 1 pound, 7 ounces when he was born. So for any listeners, if anybody runs into anyone who's had or having a preemie, reach on out. I have learned so much through my son's journey and being his advocate. I'm happy to help and be a success story for you guys.
Thank you for that, Preston. I can tell you that my oldest now is 11. My youngest is 2. They're making a lot of mess, a lot of noise, keeping me busy. And sounds like I have what to expect when they grow older.
It's a blast when they get older. So at 11, they're still young, but take advantage of the next couple of years, because once they get their driver's learner's permit, You'll see lots of them. So, take advantage of the time, that you'll have with your child before they get their driver's license and their permit.
That's great. And Preston, you already offered people to reach out to you. What is the best way to do it? Is it LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn would be great. We'll see if we can include a link to my profile on the podcast. But yeah, we've had a really good journey over the last 2 years in implementing FinOps at AvidXchange. Excited about the next couple of years and really trying to leverage our data to drive discussions and value. And it's been great. I'm totally in sync with my leadership, with Eric Smith and DJ Navarrete. And, as I mentioned, like with Tag-a-thon, our CIO, loves to reference, the success the organizational success that we had with Tag-a-thon. And I always share like little data nuggets with her that she could use in future presentations of how it really was a team win for AvidXchange.
Very cool. And I can personally testify that you've done a lot more stuff that we just haven't had the time to discuss over the podcast. So if anyone want to learn more, feel free to reach out to Preston. Preston, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be able to participate and help push the FinOps mission.
Absolutely. And I would also like to thank our listeners that make this podcast come true and make it possible. If you learned something new, like I did, or if you had a lot of laugh like I did, feel free to share with your friends. Preston, thank you so much for joining us. This has been another amazing, great episode of FinOps in Action. See you next time. That wraps up another episode of FinOps in Action. Thank you for joining. For show notes and more, please visit finopsinaction.com. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action.